What's going on, everyone? Doc here, and today I want to talk about Man-Thing. So I received Man-Thing through part of the content creator program. I'm not affiliated with Kabam or Marvel in any way. This is just a program so that we get to review these champions early, test them out, and make videos for you guys. So Man-Thing has been a really interesting test out champion. He has abilities that I like to liken to Dr. Voodoo a lot, but he's very different. He's an absolute tank. You can see a 20k base health there. Puts him at just below King Groot in terms of base health, and he also has some regen as well. So I'll hop into his abilities first, and then we'll go into some gameplay, and I'll show you what I really mean. So let's get started. Man-Thing has three passive abilities. First one is very defensive passive ability, Made of Mush. So, because he's made of the swamp mush, he is immune to armor break or shatter debuffs, as you see here with Medusa, and he prevents critical hits from dealing bonus damage. 1085 for both a medium non-crit and a crit. Crits do the exact same amount of damage that they do normally. An absolutely insane tanky ability. Lack of blood also makes him immune to bleed effects. Man-Thing's second passive is his empathetic agitation. So he'll gain +5 agitation through either being struck by an attack or when hitting a buffed opponent with a medium attack. And this is a passive fury. You can see counting up to 100 there at 80, sorry, to 16 goes all the way to 87 in this clip, and it increases up to a maximum of 100. So as his agitation grows, he gets up to an 80% base attack increase. It falls off over time, similar to Gulk falling off faster the longest been since its last increase. If the opponent is a villain or has an active buff, he will wait 5 seconds after each increase before agitation starts to fall off. Man-Thing's third and final passive is his acidic secretions. He has some really interesting ability names. Each time he makes contact with the opponent, he has a 15% chance, based on his current agitation, to nullify a buff off of the opponent. So increasing higher chance the more agitation he has. Man-Thing's toxic pustules, which is a buff that he places on the opponent similar to Voodoo's Loas. It's best explained with the heavy attack, but that's mostly just how I play him and how I'd also recommend playing him. So what happens is that any buff other than a toxic pustule that is nullified on the opponent has a 100% chance to become one of these toxic pustules, lasting for 15 seconds. So like I just said with acidic secretions, he can nullify buffs that way, and through his SP2. Whenever a toxic pustule buff is nullified, however, it has a 100% chance to burst, becoming a poison debuff and an armor break debuff. So when he nullifies, first it becomes this toxic pustule, and then it will become the poison and the armor break. Now the poison debuff deals 1000 damage over 15 seconds and reduces regeneration effects by 30%. This can be stacked, so the more poison you have, the lower the regeneration rate is actually going to go. Armor break reduces armor by a flat rate and also lasts for 15 seconds. Now, like I said, his heavy attack is the easiest way to turn these pustules into the debuffs. So while heavy attack charging, you not only have a 100% chance to gain an unstoppable buff for 1 second, but you have a 100% chance to nullify each toxic pustule buff on the opponent. And your armor break and poison debuffs caused by bursting these have a 50% increased potency, so 50% increased amount of armor break that you're doing, and a 50% increase to the damage that the poison debuffs will be doing as well. On all special attacks, whenever he activates them, Man-Thing has a 100% chance to place a toxic pustule buff on the opponent, lasting the normal 15 seconds. On his SP1, 100% chance on contact, so you actually make contact with the opponent twice, so for a total of 3 toxic pustules placed on this, to place a toxic pustule buff on the opponent, again lasting the normal 15 seconds. Man-Thing's SP2 has a 100% chance to nullify up to 2 buffs per hit, and these will be all turned into toxic pustules. Man-Thing's SP3 has a 100% chance to do 3 things. First off, you're going to be getting a Fury buff, increasing attack, but for 30 seconds. You're going to be placing a poison debuff on the opponent, dealing damage based on agitation for 20 seconds, and again reducing regeneration as all poisons do. You also have a 100% chance to place 2 toxic pustule buffs on the opponent. They will then be able to convert into more poisons. Man-Thing's dupe ability will do 2 different things based on his health level. If he is above 50% health, he has a 100% chance to trigger a Fury buff, increasing attack for 10 seconds. If you are below 50% health, even if you're just at 49 like I am in that clip, I'm at 49 for 1 tick, I have a 100% chance to gain a regeneration buff, which regenerates 4.5% health over 10 seconds. Man-Thing has 4 different unique synergies, and all of them are really good in their own way. With her Fearsome 4, with She-Hulk and Howard the Duck, if you're struck by a basic attack while under the effect of an Unstoppable buff, so when you're charging your heavy attack, you will have a 100% chance to gain an Indestructible buff lasting half a second. This is great. You can basically use your heavy attack in the middle of the opponent's combo when they're hitting you. You just launch a heavy attack, you're not going to take any damage, and it's going to hit. With Ghost Rider, he has this Bane of Evil synergy, which means agitation starts at and will never fall below 50 versus a villain. What this means is whenever you're fighting a villain with Man-Thing, you will have a minimum 40% damage increase at all times. With the Thing, well-timed blocks grant a Fury buff, increasing Man-Thing's attack by 25% for 1.5 seconds. Great if you just want to get a 25% increase on your heavy attack damage. With King Groot, again, well-timed blocks this time inflict a poison debuff, dealing 25% of attack as damage over 5 seconds, reducing regen as all poisons do. Some really interesting synergies. They all are helpful in different ways, and they're great to even have all of them together. So I have 7 fights here for the Man-Thing gameplay. So first off, just a quick duel against Aegon. So I really liked this matchup here. Aegon gets a lot of gets up to 6 Furies when you hit him, so a lot of buffs. Gets to increase my agitation a little bit, and I guess you can see I'm nullifying all of those basic Furies. So I go for another quick combo using SP2, up to 9 Toxic Postulates, quick heavy, and he's pretty much going to just die from that poison right away. Mystic Dispersion got me up to an SP3, I don't even need it. I absolutely love Mystic Dispersion combined with Man-Thing. I wouldn't say it's a necessary mastery, but it is absolutely incredible. I use him very similar to Dr. Voodoo in terms of power rotation when I want to get maximum damage. Very much I use the SP1 to place, unlike Dr. Voodoo, we're using the SP1 to actually turn the poisons, turn the buffs into the poisons. Use the SP1 to actually place them, and use the heavy attack to turn them. So you can see I got the heavy attack there, the indestructible triggered. I am using, I believe, 3 of the synergies. The only synergy I'm not using is the Thing synergy, because I didn't have him as a 5-star. This is 6.1. I'm going to do 2 long distance fights, 1 close encounters, and 1 power struggle. Bunch of different options to show you guys how he works against those. I believe I use an SP2 real quickly there. Old Man Logan's a great matchup. Lots of different buffs for me to convert into toxic pustules, which means they can get a lot of poisons. Converting and turning them to poison. So we're both converting them into toxic pustules, and we're actually turning them into poisons as well at the same time with that same SP2, because it can actually do both. It both nullifies the actual buffs, and it can nullify the buffs to toxic pustules. Very good SP3 there. Didn't really need to get there. I meant to use another SP2, but that's alright. 12 poisons. You see that 1 tick down there? I believe that negative 1 tick there is actually all of the poisons reversing the healing. Along with Mystic Dispersion, I would highly recommend the Despair Mastery for him. You place so many debuffs that you're just going to be reversing healing even more. Against Deadpool, another heavy regener this time, except he doesn't have a lot of buffs. So I'm going to be using the SP1 a lot more than the SP2. I don't think I even used the SP2 once during this fight. And instead of me focusing on getting all the toxic pustules through my SP1 and then converting them with a heavy attack, instead of trying to convert any of Deadpool's buffs, because he doesn't have any except for that regen. He really did do well in 6.1. As a 5-star R3, he's doing pretty good. I think as an R4, he'd do a little better. However, he was able to survive a lot. I think he'll be really good for Lion's Quest and just questing in general. That survivability that keeps you around 50% is great. He does not synergize well with Synergies, and I wouldn't say that's what I like about him, but I do prefer champions that don't need them as much. Personally, I don't run them. I never have. I think his biggest thing, I think, is you really want MD, and then Despair is a good thing to have. in terms of masteries and that kind of stuff. So Deadpool is pretty much down now. He's about to get his regen in a second here. We have so many poisons that we're pretty much going to stop the regen anyways. He gets up to a little bit there once our poisons go away, but our poisons were still out damaging it in addition to reducing the healing. So he really wasn't able to heal up much. Got to 1% here, and the heavy attack is going to finish him off. So that was both of the long distance fights. So the weakness debuff you saw was reducing our attack. Now for close encounters. Close encounters, I thought he'd be a really good matchup for. I thought if I get below 50%, then his regen is really going to bring him back, and I was pretty heavily surprised that his regen isn't as powerful as I'd like it to be, but it is consistent. You aren't allowed to get up really above that 50% mark, which is perfectly fine. It's similar to Blade at that 70% mark, but I really think that it doesn't do it does a pretty good amount per tick, but it's just not as much as the degen is going to be. Phoenix is a good matchup. I was trying to push her to the SP2 so that she'd get more Furies, and you can see the Furies that she gets. We pretty much converted them. She used an SP1, which I really would have liked her not to, but can't really control that. Basically just trying to get her to get as many Furies as possible so that I can convert them to Toxic Pustules, and from there turn them into poisons. See right there, she's now up to 4 poisons. I think she uses another SP1 here in a second, because I used a heavy attack. I should have gone in for a combo and then launched an SP1 instead, most likely. That probably would have been a little better. Another great thing about those poisons in Phoenix is that they're going to stop her healing. She was healing, she tried to heal 11, the most healing she got there was 11,000 at the very end, and you can see we just crushed right through her again. Only ended up on 36% health. I was hoping to end up on a little bit more, but close encounters, not too bad of an option for him as well, because he has healing to offset it. Final Act 6 fight, Superior Iron Man on Power Struggle. Synergizes pretty well with Power Struggle. It's all about getting to this SP1, which you're just going to spam it, and that's really helpful. The degen taking down his Aspect of Nightmares, we're going to heal that back in a second, right there. Essentially, I'm just going to be rotating in and out of my SP1 based on him. Mystic Dispersion didn't help me here, but he actually did by having the defensive power gain be a little bit more, because I was able to pretty much get an SP1 after every single combo. This is the only time you don't need to have Mystic Dispersion, but this node is pretty rare anyways. It's mostly in Act 6. At least that I've seen it so far. Again, just the same thing every single time. The SP1, throw it in, and then parry for the heavy attack. He really does fall flat on... I haven't talked about poison immune fights so far. I'm going to show a poison immune fight against Realm of Legends Captain Marvel in a minute, after I show Realm of Legends Winter Soldier. Now I'm showing them both at 4 times speed, and they are incredibly long fights, both of them. He only did 58 hits, but his damage over time is really where you need to be getting the most damage. So this is 4 times sped up. You can see that I'm doing a pretty good job keeping the poisons up. You really see me doing SP1, 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 and heavy attack pretty much every single time. I don't think, because I was going for damage this time, I don't think I even used the SP2 once here. You'll see me, if I slowed this down, you could see me intercepting with the SP1, but that's not super important to show. I just mostly want to show that he's capable of doing this fight pretty well. Not too bad at all. He ends up, I believe, 190 something hits at the end of this, so not too bad at all. But Captain Marvel next up is a pretty awful fight. So yeah, 193 hits. Next up, Captain Marvel, this time poison immune. You can also look up Man-Thing's health as well and see that I pretty much stay around 50%. I get hit a couple of times, but I regen it back up. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel is very slowly going down. Yes, I have class advantage, that's helping my raw hits. You see armor breaks sometimes go up to like 8 or 9, which is not bad at all, but I'm doing the same rotation as I did against Winter Soldier. I just don't have that damage over time this time, so it really is a much slower fight. I had a vision in this gameplay on that same long distance, but I cut it out because it was such a long and boring fight. Because he's poison immune, I didn't want to speed it up like I did for this. but it really just is such a slow fight when they are poison immune. And I think that's my biggest problem with his damage currently. I think I'd really enjoy him if he was made different from Voodoo, by maybe making him have some sort of different debuff that a lot of Cosmics weren't immune to. So hit count on that one, 292. Overall, I'd say Man-Thing's certainly a really interesting champion. Personally, I really enjoyed playing him and testing him out. I really do think his abilities line up quite a bit with Dr. Voodoo, but he's missing the power drain utility that Voodoo has. He has the armor break to supposedly make up for it in damage, but I didn't really notice it. Dr. Voodoo is going to do more in general, just by his power burn ability. His synergies are certainly really cool, and they do help him out a little bit with pretty good synergies for his opponents as well. I think the synergy with Ghost Rider having a 40% base attack increase at all times when fighting a villain is probably his best synergy that there is. I'd say he was definitely a lot of fun to test out. I definitely would put him in the, probably at most in like the amazing, maybe low demigod tier if a lot of champions weren't immune to poison. Because he focuses on that poison, and this is my problem with Dr. Voodoo as well, you're going to face so many fights where his damage is going to be so low. I would have loved to see this turned into an acidic. He even has it in the name, the acidic secretions. I would have loved to see it turned into an acidic debuff, or maybe even a poison passive, so that poison immunes are still immune to it, but debuff immunes, I didn't even mention them, are going to be an awful, awful fight for him. I tried him out against Masochism, and because of the way Masochism works, a single heavy attack, they're going to clear all 6 of those debuffs. They're going to clear all the poisons you place on them and all the armor breaks as well, just in a single thing and a regen from it. So he really does have quite a few faults, sadly, because I really did want to like him. And I do think he's certainly an interesting champion. If I personally had him, I'd probably use a Cosmic Awakening or a Mystic Awakening gem on him because I have 3 of them. And I'd take him up to R3 to bring him into something like AQ, where I need somebody who's going to last for a very long time and who can deal pretty good damage to a general amount of champions, but he has no real specialty that I found. I tried to bring him into the 6-2-6 champion fight, and I got KO'd him instantly. I got him all the way there, and I got KO'd. So I still haven't actually beaten the champion with anyone yet, so I'm hoping to do that at some point. But I tried Man-Thing to see if he was the secret to that, but he really isn't. Below 40% health, I'd be taking damage from nullifying anyways, so I didn't expect him to do that well, but I was hoping he could do at least as good as Voodoo did. When I used Voodoo, I got him to the 10%, but with Man-Thing, I'm sure someone with a lot of practice could do that, but personally, I was unable to. So I did generally really enjoy Man-Thing. He's a ton of fun to play. He plays like Voodoo for people who don't like Dr. Voodoo, essentially. Being able to stack those poisons as well as Dr. Voodoo and get that kind of damage, but without the power gain, he really does fall flat. He's only a large champion, so he's not even helpful for variant 2, where you need extra large champions. He's definitely lacking a little bit, but he was a fun champion. I'd love to see in a couple months, then I would love to see a offensive buff for him. I could definitely see that happening, and I really hope that it has to do with his poisons and possibly making them either a passive or turning them into some sort of specialty debuff that Cosmics won't be immune to. So that's generally my thoughts on him. Quick comic trivia for those who don't know. You may know Swamp Thing from DC, but did you know Man-Thing was actually released a month before Swamp Thing? Very cool thing I found out while researching Man-Thing. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. I'd give Man-Thing a 6 out of 10. Definitely fun to play, lots of sustainability, some good damage if he can place that damage, but he falls flat in a lot of places, and no specialty. So 5 or 6 out of 10. If you want to go from a Marina, If you need a Mystic Champion, he's definitely worth taking a look at, though, if you like his playstyle from what you've seen here. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.